I would love to introduce director Chloe Domont, Forbes 30 Under 30, and founder of Girl Talk Sports TV, Christina Williams. And the author of Bully Market, Jamie Fiore-Higgins. Thank you all for being here. All right, before we start talking, what did you guys think? I have Jamie's book and my notes and a water bottle, so we're just gonna I'm gonna ask my first question, then I'm gonna juggle. I wanna start with the why for each of you, and I'll start with Chloe. Why did you make this film?
Because it was burning inside of me, and I couldn't not make it, is the first answer. No, there were years where I had this feeling as my career was starting to take off, where my successes and my accomplishments didn't feel like a win. It started to feel like a loss in many ways because of the kinds of men I was dating, the kinds of relationships I was having. These were men who adored me for my strengths. You know, they adored me for my ambition and all these things, but at the same time, they still couldn't help but feel threatened by the very same things that they adored me for, you know, because of the way that they were raised or what was instilled in them. And it just made me realize how much hold these ingrained power dynamics still have over us. So I wanted to put that on screen and be as ruthless with it as you know, the nature of the subject matter itself.
And we'll get into the ways your film has resonated personally with each of us. But Christina, what is your why? Why did you start your company?
I started my company because I was working after college in post-production in the corporate world, and I felt like I was overperforming, overachieving, but still undervalued and being underpaid. And so really, I just took a step out on faith. I've been a huge sports fan ever since I was a little girl. At 10 years old, I was an advocate for women's sports. I played basketball growing up, and even at 10 years old, I wanted to play basketball, but at my school, we didn't have a team. And so at 10 years old, little Christina walked up to the principal and the basketball coach and, you know, just advocated to have a girls' team. And by the time we were in 6th grade, we had a basketball team, and I was able to participate. But going into my adult life, my involvement with sports kind of evolved. And so with Girls Talk Sports TV, I saw that women's sports receives less than 4% of all media coverage, less than 1% of all sponsorship dollars. And I just really just had that passion to be an advocate and to create a solution to the problem that I saw. And so I wanted to create a space where women were seen, heard, and valued, and that birthed Girls Talk Sports TV to tackle that lack of coverage and to bridge the gap in coverage as well.
Jamie, why did you write Bully Market?
So I left Goldman Sachs in 2016 after an almost 2-decade career. And I resigned, and when the first couple of months I was gone, I really reflected on how much I had changed from the 21-year-old woman who got the job to the 40-year-old woman who left, and how much that organization changed me, not for the better. And I really reflected on why I endured all the toxicity that I endured, but also more importantly, why I perpetuated it as well. And I got really curious about that. And I just started exploring it on the page. And I felt really fortunate that it was in a time, you know, kind of with all the social justice movements, that there seemed to be a real interest in authentic stories. And I felt inspired to put mine out there. And so I really wrote it to shine light on what's really going on in the workplace today in terms of gender inequality, inspire much needed conversation, which often doesn't happen, with the hopes of creating some change.
So you had emailed me like, whoo, watching this was surreal. So I want to ask each of you, and a different question for Chloe because she wrote it, but which part of the movie most resonated with you? I'll start with Jamie, if you can pick just one.
You know, it's so much. I mean, honestly, as I was watching the movie, I'm like, oh, I could have added that in my book, and I didn't. That would have been a really good thing to talk about. But really, what really resonated with me was Emily, and how hard she was trying to be so many different roles to so many different people, all the while trying to be true to herself, to kind of feel like she had to take care of this man on some level while wanting to own her power and her intelligence, and how that's just, there's such a competition there, and how exhausting it is. Like how exhausting it is when there's only 24 hours a day to try to live two lives.
Christina, which parts resonated with you as an entrepreneur and as a woman in sports journalism?
Yeah, some of the parts that resonated with me the most, I would say, as a woman who works predominantly in a male-dominated industry, I guess is the idea that women climb the ladder to success not based on their merit, but based off other ideas, and our credibility often gets questioned when we are in those spaces. That really resonated with me because I experienced that as a sports journalist, covering sports news. I'm one of the only black women who break news in the WNBA space in a non-traditional way, and I'm always fighting for my life every day online with just credibility and just saying that I belong in this space and you should respect me. So those are some of the parts that resonated with me in the film.
And Chloe, I'm sure you love all parts of the movie equally, but if you had to pick, do you have a favorite scene or even a scene where you used a directorial technique to evoke a certain emotion that the audience should know about?
Yeah, my favorite scene is actually the first scene that came to me that when I started writing the script, which was the scene when Emily gets the promotion and her first reaction isn't excitement, it's fear. And her coming home and that walk home and the dread and the silence of when she gets in there to talk to him and tell him about it. The way we shot it too is I wanted her to feel very small in the frame. So there's a couple shots that are over his shoulder, and he's very dominant in the frame, and she's very small in the frame and looking away and afraid to even look at him. And I just felt like that encompassed what I was trying to explore with that, and everything you were saying, the two roles of wanting, this is everything she's ever worked for in her life, and yet she can't enjoy it because she fears that, she'll lose something on another level, and, it'll cost her. So.
We will eventually open it up to the floor for questions, so start thinking now, because I'm going to intersperse my questions with yours. So if you have a question for any of our panelists, get ready to ask. But what really resonated with me was the way that the misogyny and sexism is more insidious than what is often portrayed on screen. A lot of it is usually the overt. Even I saw something earlier today on the news, a BBC reporter was groped while doing a report on the street, right? There's still the overt sexism that exists in the society. I don't want to pretend like it doesn't. But do you think we're talking enough about the more subtle forms of sexism? And I'll start with...
No, we're not. No, I think that, that's part of why I made this film. I think that this is a conversation that I wanted to bring forward, and it's something I think when we unfortunately have normalized a lot of these things, especially the more subtle things, because there are the more explicit things out there that but the more subtle things we just normalize and we just deal with it, and we don't talk about it, and I think it's a problem in the workplace and behind bedroom doors.
I see you nodding, Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so enmeshed in the fabric of corporate America culture that I do think that there might be some inroads to the way things happen in the workplace after all these social justice movements, but I still feel there's like a slow erosion of women's careers. It might not be blunt force trauma, but it's a death of 1,000 paper cuts, where it just happens so under wraps. And you're absolutely right. What I always observed was this kind of bad behavior was ignored and then normalized. And then the scary part is usually after that, it's escalated. So that's why it's so important that those little tiny breadcrumbs you were constantly leaving, it's like a snowball that it constantly builds.
Jamie, you said something backstage about when Bloomberg News did a story on your book 3 months before it came out, you got some phone calls. And I wouldn't call it necessarily backlash or pushback against the book, but can you share with the audience what happened?
Yeah, a bunch of men that I work with were all of a sudden really curious how I was doing. And, wanted to congratulate me on my book and what I've been up to. And, gee, Jamie, I hope nothing I did or said is going to be in that book. So it was pretty amazing, like clockwork, from junior people to very senior people. It was a real big CYA. So it was funny.
And Christina, being a woman on the internet covering sports, I'm sure you've never experienced backlash from a man ever.
Absolutely, especially when it comes to like breaking news and the women's sports space in particular. I feel like a lot of people operate out of a scarcity mindset, and so they try to own every part of, the news or the opportunities. And so when they see someone like me, a black woman, come into the space and be a disruptor, they feel threatened.
I did see a hand over here.
My question is, I guess, to you, Chloe. I feel like Emily's character was like really full of dignity through the whole movie, and then in the last scene, she kind of turned like really crazy and started to cut him, and why you turned her crazy?
Well, first of all, I set out to make a thriller about power dynamics within a relationship. So for me, the ending is where the meaning of the film and the genre come together in one final punch. Ultimately, I believe no matter how much you twist genre, manipulate it, you still have to pay it off in the end. So in terms of working within the thriller genre, that uses violence as a means to solve conflict. So that's what I set out, to make. That's what I was, working towards. It's also an entertainment medium. But in terms of the arc there, I think this is a woman who's pushed to the brink and pushed to the edge, and he pushes her as far as I think you could possibly push someone, and cuts her down on every single level. And for me, like, the intention with the end is in some ways, cutting a man down who's cut her down on all these different, ways, through emotional violence, verbal violence, and physical violence. And ultimately, the scene is about holding a man accountable, a man who refuses to be held accountable on any single level. And unfortunately, like, she tries to use her words to confront him with the brutality that he inflicts on her, but he cannot own that. And so, she has to use the same physical force that he used when he reclaimed, the power against her in the bathroom.
One of the lines that so jumped out at me was the exchange about, like, wouldn't you have been jealous? And Emily snaps back, I wasn't threatened. Where did that line come from? Because I think that distinction is so powerful, and it resonated with me as a woman who's never felt threatened by her partner professionally, but I certainly have been jealous.
I think that this is at the core of these ingrained power dynamics between men and women, and in terms of like success, it's like a man's success is always a win for the relationship, but when it's the other way around, why is it a threat? And it's like, that's what I really want to explore with this film is the toxic link between female empowerment and male fragility, and why is it that a woman being big makes a man feel small? Like, why are those two things so closely linked? And I think this is a systemic societal problem. I think that it's the the way that society raises boys to believe that masculinity is an identity when it's not. It's an energy. And so boys grow up to believe, are raised to believe that they have to fit in the box, that success is a zero-sum game, and it's not. But
I see you both nodding. How have you each navigated this dynamic?
Well, we talked about this backstage, Maggie. So in one of my longest term relationships, I guess, I I met my ex when I was in college, and then at the height of my rise, I guess, in sports media, I felt the dynamics of the relationship change. He was older than me by 10 years. And so at the tail end of his career, we both work in sports. And so I felt myself kind of walking on eggshells to make the relationship survive. And I felt like I was losing myself in that and just losing everything that I represent. I remember one time he posed a question to me, like, would you give up everything to be with me? And I was like, no. Absolutely not. I worked so hard to get to where I am, and eventually we ended it, and I just, had to take care of myself and prioritize myself, and that took a lot of self-healing, going to therapy, just getting more support from the people around me to get out of that dark place.
That's helpful. I have been told by more than one partner that I care too much about work. And then I laugh for a really good long time after, but therapy also helps. Jamie, how have you experienced the jealousy, threat, and divide, either personally or professionally? Because I'm sure within Goldman, too, when you got a promotion, it's...
Yeah, I mean, I'll never forget when I was first tapped on the shoulder to manage a business, and my now people who would be working for me that were my peers, so they were saying this to their new boss: you only got it, because you have a vagina. And so, unfortunately, the mistake I made was that I actually doubted myself. And then you say, oh wait, maybe, And so, that's kind of that, you never really directly say gaslighting, but it's that whole kind of concept of you're getting all these cues from the environment. And it's like, they often say if you want to be it, you have to see it. And at Goldman, there were not a lot of women in corner offices, so I couldn't see it. I had to just be it without seeing it. And my biggest regret was letting that seep into my mind and internalize it a little bit. I still move forward, but I always saw that there was that kind of pushback into any way they could cut you down. And the easiest way when you're a woman among all men is saying it's because of your lady parts.
I see lots of hands over here. Do we have a mic for your hand?
I think this film brought up a lot for all of us. But I also think that one of the many things that make sisterhood so strong is, in a way, like a collective song. I think so many people resonated with not just one scene from the movie, but many. As I felt myself gasp, I felt other people gasp at the same parts. But it made me wonder, like, with so many women and so many stories, so many things that we've gone through, both individually and collectively, as someone who made this, what did you decide to cut? What did you leave out? And why? Because when you only have so much time for a movie, you need to do what's called in editing, trim the fat. What did you leave out and why?
The first thing that comes to mind is actually some of the more comedic scenes. Because I felt like it was deflating the balloon of tension that I was building, and it was undermining some of the really emotional, and the weight overall. But I would say the first thing that we kind of cut were scenes that were just kind of there for comedy, like little bits of lines there, comedic lines here and there. We kept, that was always there, but that's fine. But yeah, I needed to respect and hold on to this idea of a ticking time bomb and the ballooning tension, and until it does pop, and then it turns into a dogfight and all hell breaks loose. Yeah, I can't. I'm trying to think of other. There's more than scene, like scenes. I would say things. It was just I wanted to shape this film like a bullet. And so it was a lot of maybe honing the scene and trimming the scene so that it's just as sharp as it could be.
And then I think I promised the triangle tip in orange or pink. Oh, I'm colorblind.
No, the lights are bright. It's not you. The lights are bright. It's hard to take.
No worries, no worries. Oh, microphone. No worries at all. I had one question actually for all of you. If you could go back in time and give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would you tell her?
I think about this all the time. I was really under the spell of Goldman. In fact, the scene where he knelt and thought of his boss as God, like, that's how I really felt there. Like, that I was nothing without Goldman, nothing without their name, nothing without their money, nothing without their title. Me being Jamie from Goldman meant that I had arrived, and they were very good at making me believe that the only reason why I was good at my job was because of them, when it was all because of me. And so what I would tell my younger self is, yeah, of course, listen, working at Goldman Sachs is great, and they pay you well, and they give you access, but all those goodies that make you kick ass at your job, they're yours. And if you walk out the door, you're going to take them with you. And don't let anyone convince you for a second that any of your goodies are a result of them.
That's good. I would just tell my younger self that, you are good enough. I feel like, well, very interesting. I was going through some of my mom's old stuff, and I found a report card from 2nd grade. I don't know why she had that in her possession. But one of the things my 2nd grade teacher wrote is that Christina is overachieving student. And I feel like that has followed me throughout my entire life, where I try to outperform, overachieve, and sometimes it's at the detriment of myself. Like, I get burnt out. I feel like I have to please everybody. So I would just tell myself that, you are good enough just the way you are. Just simple.
Just to add to what you were saying, because mine is similar, but a little shorter and spicier, because, But my thing is, this idea that you're lucky to be there. And the truth is that they need you more than you need them.
That's right.
See a hand right there, the gentleman.
Great film. Two very quick. One, what should men take away from this? And I just saw Industry a week ago. It's given the same remnants. I feel like there's a message with this, like, I don't know if it's misogyny or whatever it is, but like, what are you seeing film-wise? Because this is now the 2nd or 3rd film that I've seen where it feels like my job, but women are telling their stories, if you will, at investment banks and firms. And me being someone new, I'm like, I saw that. Like, I saw it in person. So what's the story you think that's brewing?
Well, I can't speak for Industry. I can only speak for my film and what I set out to do. But for me, like, yes, this film is also set in the finance world, but I think every woman in any industry can relate to this film. And, for me, I had no experience in finance. I wrote this through my experience, in my field. But what I want, the main takeaway for, I hope that this film raises questions and starts conversations and debate, but ideally the same questions that drove me to writing this film in the first place, which is, how can we dismantle the link between female empowerment and male fragility? How can we demystify the role that men are raised into thinking they're supposed to fill? How can women embrace their successes without fearing that it'll hurt them on some level? And how can we love and trust one another in a world that's so dependent on the very power dynamics that get in the way of that love and trust and respect?
I think we have time for the orange shirt right in front of the gentleman. I hope that's orange. I'm now questioning my interpretation of every color.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. So the question that I have for you is, I really love the film, but I did see a part where we had parents, right? But I didn't see how parents were supposed to help with this, because we didn't see in the movie they invited their parents, but when she hit him with the glass, we didn't see the parents say anything when he said all those mean things. So what do you want parents to take from this? Because I feel like you did mention that we need to teach our kids, because I'm a mom, I'm also an engineer, and I come from a world that is pretty dominated by men, but I feel like I want to teach my kids too earlier how that they shouldn't be intimidated by women's success. So what do you want parents to pick from that film?
I think that it's kind of what I said earlier, which is we should break away from this idea that masculinity is an identity, you know, and masculinity means one thing. I think that, you know, it's those seeds early on and what's instilled in us, you know, as a kid, and being raised on traditional ideas of gender roles and traditional ideas of masculinity. And for me, like right now, where I feel like a lot of men and women are caught in the middle between wanting to adhere to a modern feminist society, but still having been raised on traditional ideas of masculinity and gender roles. So I think that's the first thing to kind of break away from, to you know, and at a young age. Yeah.
I would actually expand that question to the whole panel. You each have such different experiences. Christina, what would you want your message to parents of young children and men? What would you want them to know about your experience as a founder?
I need a little second to think about
Okay. Jamie.
I mean, I would say what you say at home matters. Every little experience matters. I feel like a lot of learned behavior, I'm a mother of 4, and I know a lot of what they're learning is just observing how I show up in the world as a mother, as a writer, as a finance person, and how their father, my spouse, shows up the same way. I sometimes feel like a lot of parents today are looking for some kind of handbook, rule book. Follow these 10 things and you'll avoid X, Y, Z. And I think it's more of model what you want them to be, and model the relationships you want them to be in, and model treating one another as you want them to treat their future partners down the road.
I do not have any children. I'm not a parent. But just from my experience, my parents were very hard on me growing up because I was always taught to be strong. You always have to be twice as good just to get the crumbs as a black woman. And so it's very traumatic, I guess, in a way. Just growing up, just like I said, overachieving, overpleasing. And so I guess the advice would be just to be supportive and give your children space to be, you know, themselves. And that's all I have. That's all I have for my own.
No, all good advice, because I think dismantling a lot of these dynamics, it takes all of that, and it takes all of us. We have time for a few more questions. Oh. You who just put your hand down, I think you were first, and I think I'm going to have to wrap after you, so if you can get that woman in. Oh, yeah, okay.
So thank you for telling your story, because I think when I was as I'm watching, I'm like, wow. It told my whole relationship that I just ended, and I'm an actor, so I really do like to connect with a film in that way, especially the ending, because we just want an apology. But my question is, how did you know you had the right Emily?
It was pretty much immediately. The character of Emily, she's a rising star in the world of finance, and so I was looking for a rising star as in the world, and basically Phoebe was she had just come off of Bridgerton. She had that buzz around her, which was exciting, but she hadn't done a major feature film before, and so that was exciting to be able to to bring her on from that, and put her in a suit and turn her into a shark, But more than that, it was just, she's an incredibly strong actor. She's incredibly versatile. I just honed in on her performances and what she had done, and I could tell she's incredibly dialed in. She's incredibly present. There's a fierceness, but also a vulnerability, and the way that the way that distress plays in her eyes, I thought was all perfect for that role.
I'm going to end with a question of my own, and we were talking about this backstage. I think in professional settings, especially Forbes settings, we often talk about the sexism that shows up in the workplace, right? What can companies do? But this hit on the personal and the insidious nature of what happens when women get big and men feel small. So I want to ask each of you, are we talking about this element of sexism enough? And if not, how should we be moving forward? I'll start with Jamie.
I mean, The answer is no, we're not talking about it enough. And, you know, when I wrote my book, I've gotten over 1,000 personal messages from people, much like so many of you felt connected to this film. People have felt connected to some of my story. But yet no one ever talks about it openly. It's always private messages, DMs on the side. It's almost like no one wants to go public with this, which is something that's so common. And that's really scary to me, that something that is so commonplace, that resonates with so many, is so taboo. And I think, to your point, I think it's because it's really has to go back to identity and the way our culture is built. And so to me, any opportunity to have food like this film to inspire conversation is right. We just have to keep talking. And kind of earlier with parents, we just have to keep talking about this at our dinner tables, out with friends, you know. Little conversations, I think, are really what are going to make a difference, not corporate-sponsored sensitivity training, as P.S. you nailed in the movie.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely think that we're not talking about it enough, and just as a black woman, I guess, sometimes it's out of fear that you'll get labeled as the angry black woman if you share your story, or people will judge you because of your identity, as you mentioned. And so I think that, you know, we have to create environments that are safe, to give room for people to be able to feel comfortable to share their stories in that way.
I mean, I think, yeah, you can't work through anything if you can't even talk about it. And this was something that I could never talk about with my male partners or with my female friends. We were talking earlier just upstage and backstage, and I was saying that, you know, this is something that even women don't want to admit, you know, like if they're with someone, like if you're with, you know, a man who is threatened by you, you don't want to admit that even to your friends, because what would that say about you and your choice of partner? So this is something that has just been pushed under the rug on, you know, so many different levels, and something that I was afraid to talk about, and there was a lot of shame there. A lot of shame and a lot of pain, and so that's why I knew this was the thing that I wanted to bring to the surface, and to say the only way to work through it is by talking about it and putting it out there.
Well, thank you for putting it out there. Thank you, Christina and Jamie, for joining us, and thank you so much to all of you for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it.